Welcome to Vitality Unlocked. I'm Dan Garner, scientist, performance coach, and Chief Innovation Officer of Vitality Blueprint. This show does one thing: convert cutting-edge science into practical strategies for high-performance health. Each episode, we take one target and run it through a simple filter. Topic, mechanisms, current state of the evidence, and your next game plan. No fluff, no gimmicks. Hey there, and welcome to episode 8 of the Vitality Unlocked podcast. I am Dan Garner, and in today's episode, we are going to be going over the truth about vitamin D. I don't know about you guys, but vitamin D is consistently in the algorithm. It's consistently on social media. It's consistently being shown as this thing that is just low, not just nationwide, but worldwide. And for that reason, we need all kinds of supplementation for it, ranging from 2,000 IU to 4,000 IU to 10,000 IU to 20. There are some huge formulas out there, but quality of data in equals quality of data out. These recommendations, these claims, they are only valuable if the marker that you are looking at has been interpreted properly. And it is my estimation that vitamin D is one of the least properly interpreted markers in sports science today. It has many things that can adjust it and make it artificially low or artificially high. And I don't really see anybody taking into consideration why a marker looks the way that it does. People are looking at vitamin D like it's the bathroom scale. Like, oh, that's my body weight today. And you just take it like, boom, that's it. I'm on the scale, one number, no thought about anything that could have adjusted that marker, no thought about the accuracy of that marker, no thought about absolutely anything. But even the bathroom scale itself, right? Depending on your glycogen storage, depending on your electrolyte status, depending on inflammation, creating any type of water retention, based on when your next bowel movement's going to be, based on menstrual cycle status, based on so many things. Even the bathroom scale has a ton of reasons why we can't just trust it at face value, just like body recomposition. Your weight not change at all, but if you're building muscle and dropping body fat at the same time, that's a really good thing. But people don't think like that with biomarkers. They kind of just look at them and then it's like, all right, guess that's my vitamin D. Today, I'm going to teach you, by the end of this episode, you are going to know how to much more confidently read vitamin D and how to much more program for vitamin D. We need to know whether or not we can actually believe this thing. Before you act on a vitamin D result, you need to know whether or not to believe it. This is a critical component in coaching because your protocol is only going to be as effective as the quality of the data that you're taking in. Like I said previously, quality of data in equals quality of data out. I can't make quality program decisions if my interpretation of anything to do with a client is wrong. If I'm interpreting their questionnaire wrong, I might make their meal plan wrong. If I'm interpreting how I'm interviewing them wrong as I'm taking them on, I might give them an incorrect motivational strategy or think they're motivated by something that they're actually not. If I'm interpreting their blood work wrong, I might be making them completely waste their money on supplements that they don't need. And worse, I may actually be putting this person in danger because of a recommendation that I am making. But people keep doing that. Again, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but you'll see someone on 2,000 IU of vitamin D3 per day, which, by the way, is not that small of a dose. I know it's small, but that's really, I'm sorry, I know that you think it's small, but that's really just because people are cranking it up. It's really just because it's common, but not normal. It's common to go way higher than that, but it's not biologically normal too. So supplements these days, I mean, you're at 2, but then you're at 4, and then there's 10, and then there's 20. And something that I routinely see people do is take 2,000 IU per day, and their vitamin D is low. Like, okay, let's bump it up to 5,000 IU per day. And the vitamin D doesn't move. And instead of saying, I wonder why that vitamin D didn't move, they go, better go up to 10,000. Better go up to 20,000. And these are like really educated people that continue to fall for the more is better trap. Look, if 5,000 IU of vitamin D is not raising it and you just came from 2,000 IU, something else is going on. You need to look at that and think, I wonder why the body is not allowing that marker to move. I wonder why status is still the same despite me more than doubling my intake. Just on a common sense level, why isn't that moving at all? At all. You should be questioning your whole protocol design when things like that happen, but I don't see that happening today. I see people reading vitamin D as if it's the bathroom scale and then programming vitamin D as if it's just more is better. The truth behind vitamin D is a lot more than that. And by the end of this episode, I really hope that you learn at least 1 to 2 new things about how to accurately interpret this. But it's kind of tough to interpret. I don't blame a lot of people for mistaking this. Number one, because a lot of people look at blood work and they kind of just trust it because it's not their job to be interpreter. It's not their job to be a master biochemist. And I don't blame them for that. You would think that the number on the paper is something you could trust, but it's really just the number on the paper. That's just the end result. But then even when you start looking at experts, it can get confusing anyways. Like you'll see here, 32. You come back with a 32 on vitamin D, and then if you look at most lab prints, that's just normal. Vitamin D range is 30 to 100. And you'll actually just come back as normal, typically within the medical field. But then you dive a little bit deeper into the actual Endocrine Society, people looking at things with respect to the hormonal status and response of what's happening with vitamin D, which we're going to get into. You're considered sufficient. So it changes from normal to sufficient. But then if you look in performance circles, like I operate in, I call that still short. And I very confidently call that still short. I call you still short in vitamin D until you're at 40. I'll give away my threshold right away at the beginning of the pod here. I call that short until you're at 40. But I'm not surprised that people do get confused by this, because this is literally one number, right? We have 32, but medically you're normal. But Endocrinology Society, they're saying sufficient, and then the Performance Society is saying you're still short. By the way, all three of these are right. They're all right. And they're all coming from very intelligent people making very intelligent and very well-informed recommendations. But it's one number. It's showing 3 different things. Now, as a listener of my podcast, as a watcher of my presentations, you are likely more in the world of, I want to be optimal. I don't want to be normal. I want to live my life. I want to have maximum vitality. I want to be able to do all the things that I want to do with all of my vigor, my physicality, my cognition, and I don't want to get injured along the way. That is the world of performance. That is the world I operate in. And that is a world where I would call 32 still short. But I would only call it short if I interpreted it correctly. And it's important to interpret this thing correctly because, you guys, vitamin D acts like a hormone. Like, I know that it is a vitamin, but vitamin D is walked around the body by vitamin D binding protein, just like hormones are carried around the body in binding proteins. Vitamin D is also carried around the body in albumin. Hormones are carried around in the body in albumin. And then vitamin D acts like hormones because it goes and binds to vitamin D receptors, and it binds to these receptors in the bone, which is creating calcium absorption and remodeling. It is binding to receptors in the muscle. This is important for strength and physicality, especially if you are truly deficient, and also just muscle function as a whole and contractile ability. And then, of course, the immune system. There's a reason why every single immune product in the world contains some amount of vitamin D in it, because vitamin D has been very clearly linked to immune system strength in the scientific literature. But you guys, this thing's walking around the body absolutely like a hormone. It's showing up in multiple systems all at once. It's not just hanging out in one area of metabolism just for ATP, or one area of metabolism just for glycogen storage or whatever. Vitamin D is everywhere. And that's kind of why the symptoms of vitamin D are kind of not helpful. It's like mood disturbances, sleep disruptions, increased susceptibility to stress, increased susceptibility to illness and injury, feelings of weakness throughout the day. It's like, all right, you're kind of just saying a lot of stuff. But whenever you look at a hormone, the symptoms are just like a lot of stuff. You ever look at the symptoms of low thyroid, or the symptoms of low testosterone, the symptoms of low estrogen, or high of any of these things? It's touching a lot of systems. So vitamin D, I just kind of want to open your eyes a little bit more as to, like, when you interpret this thing properly and program for it properly, it's a huge opportunity to change someone's life. You think about all those symptoms and you think about reversing them. That is a wildly powerful protocol. But protocols are only going to be as beneficial as they are interpreted and applied in the first place. How vitamin D can get thrown up and down. I'm going to give you a lot of examples of how it can get thrown up and down, but how this thing really works is your skin and your diet and your UVB, so that ultraviolet, that synthesis, that impacts it. Then your liver's got to go through and metabolize it, and then this thing's going to end up in the blood, mainly carried by proteins and not even in its own active form. But inflammation can drive it down. Your body fat will drive it down. Vitamin D binding protein levels will drive it down. And then this thing also has a half-life of 2 to 3 weeks. So it takes a long time to detect measurable changes, even when you are doing the right thing. So let's get into some examples of how that works. This is like, now we're kind of getting into the meat of it, okay? This is the stuff that freaking everybody misses, all right? So here are 4 reasons why vitamin D is falsely low. And I'm saying falsely low because a low number does not always mean a low athlete. Okay, these things force readings all by themselves, and they all have mechanisms tied to them. So for example, with inflammation here, inflammation, there are a lot of things that respond in response to acute inflammation, but it's called an acute phase reactant. So if something is a reactant to inflammation, then it will go down. And in this case, it will go down. And in the presence of acute inflammation, vitamin D binding protein and albumin, they both specifically go down. So in the presence of a marker such as C-reactive protein, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, C-reactive protein being elevated will push vitamin D down, but not really. It's pushing vitamin D carrier proteins down, which artificially makes vitamin D look down. This is a false low flag. So you have less albumin and you have less vitamin D binding protein in the blood. Therefore, there's less carriers of vitamin D in the blood. Therefore, there's not as much vitamin D in the blood at the time of draw. But that is due to acute inflammation. That's not due to systemic availability of vitamin D within the body. Next here, your binding proteins. This is the exact same type of thing, but it can also, you can have low binding proteins for other reasons that aren't just related to inflammation, although they're often related to inflammation. But if you have gut health issues, if you are chronically undereating, there's other things that can cause low protein availability, but inflammation is the biggest one in this world. Higher body fat. Higher body fat. Vitamin D is fat soluble. So if you have high levels of body fat on your body, that vitamin D is getting stored in adipose tissue. So that's going to other areas, and it's not just going to show up in the free serum. That is as more of a smooth absorption of vitamin D across the body. And there's also a release of vitamin D as you do continue to get leaner, as you do continue to release that vitamin D from the blood on the way back down, which can cause a lot of weird, readings that can kind of throw you off, but it's really just a expectation of physiology rather than a surprise. And lastly, malabsorption. You can be on vitamin D supplementation. You can be taking in vitamin D foods, whatever it's going to be. If it's not coming from the sun, then you're going to want some fat and a healthy gut in order to absorb it. So you can be on the 2,000 or the 5,000 or the 10,000, but if you have poor gut health, or if you're not taking this in with fat for optimal absorption, then like the input's not matching what you're measuring, right? The input's not matching the output. You would think your vitamin D supplement's doing something, but because of gut health issues, because of poor absorption due to your own, poor selection of what you're co-consuming with vitamin D, then you're going to get like a confusing reading because you're on 10,000 IU, but things just don't look the way that you want. So here's the 4 really common known ways in which the body will have a lower vitamin D reading. And there's other readings out there too. They're not as well understood. They don't have this rock solid mechanism like the ones I'm showing you here, but things like air pollution have been connected to low vitamin D. Heavy metal exposure has been connected to low vitamin D. There's things that are less well understood, but have been seen in the literature to artificially make this thing look low. What can make it look high? A recent big dose. If you're not standardizing your blood draws, and I know I've said this in previous podcasts, and I'm going to keep saying it, you guys have to standardize your blood draw. If you are not creating an environment that mirrors a similar fasting time, a similar, sleep, a similar hydration status, a similar washout period for your supplements, then, that's just a lot of adjustments to be made for your interpretation. You want your draw environment to be as identical as possible from draw to draw, because vitamin D, if you have a recent big dose, then it's going to make you look artificially good. You're going to have an artificially high reading, but that's just not real. The analogy you can think about that is if you really crammed the night before a test, you actually might get a good score, but you don't have any knowledge. You crammed the night before a test, you got a good score, but your knowledge of the topic is still nothing because you crammed. I've done that before, and I know you've done that before. That's kind of like having vitamin D the day before your test. You've got an artificially high reading, but you don't actually have the systemic availability in the absence of cramming. All right, so that recent big dose does do it. A high binding protein, things like pregnancy or even just estrogen, whether you're male or female, these increase albumin and increase vitamin D binding protein, which will increase serum perception of vitamin D status. And you don't necessarily have high vitamin D or that level of vitamin D. It only looks that way because estrogen is pulling up the amount of proteins that are carrying these things within the blood. C3 epimers as well. This is an inactive mirror image form, and many assays count it as real vitamin D, so the reading can read as high, but it's absolutely not. That's just a completely false reading. And then lastly, dehydration is the same kind of thing, but through like a different way as the estrogen or the pregnancy indications. So dehydration, it dehydrates your blood, which makes it more concentrated, which nudges the perception of the proteins within the blood and nudges that a little bit higher. It'll increase things like albumin. It'll increase the other carrier proteins, which then are bound to vitamin D and therefore make the sample of your blood look more concentrated in vitamin D than it actually is. So high reasons that a vitamin D can be artificially high. There's 4 with known mechanisms. You guys tracking so far? I've given you 8 different reasons why vitamin D can either be low or high. And there's others out there that exist too. Do you see anybody talking about this on Instagram? Do you see anybody talking about this on blogs? Do you see anybody talking about this on podcasts? Or are they just saying things like everybody's low on vitamin D? We all need to be taking vitamin D. Vitamin D is the miracle thing for this, that, and the other. If you're interpreting right, but most people aren't. A lot of people are actually missing some obvious things that are right in front of their face. This one is right in front of your face. Okay, put your hand up right now if you know somebody who's inflamed and overweight. Hey, do you know anyone who could possibly be inflamed and overweight? Do you know what percentage of the Western population might be inflamed and overweight? Do you know what percentage of the Western population comes back low as vitamin D or trending low? A lot, right? Probably a lot on both sides. Well, I just told you inflammation brings the number down and body fat also brings it down. Inflammation's killing albumin and vitamin D binding protein. Guys, that a panel with acute inflammation or illness can bring vitamin D 40% lower on a single draw. 40, not 14. It can make vitamin D appear 40% lower on a single draw. So you need to pair your vitamin D interpretation with C-reactive protein before actually trusting the result. Inflammation will bring it down. But then also with body fat, vitamin D is fat soluble and it is sequestered into adipose tissue. So it is diluted across more body tissue as you are bigger. So the same intake will reveal lower on a blood test purely due to higher body fat. But these things usually travel together, right, guys? Inflammation and obesity and inflammation, that's kind of like brother, sister. They travel together a lot. And I'm completely unsurprised that many countries as a whole, you look at national databases on vitamin D status, and sure, if you are within the 35 degrees and upward in terms of the geometric latitude, longitudes, you're in an area where there's a lot less sun. Okay, this is real. I'm not discounting that, right? I'm in Canada. There is not a lot of sun here. A lot of people are actually low in vitamin D, but I absolutely also believe that we are over-interpreting how big those numbers probably are, because we're not taking into consideration the adaptation or the interpretive ability of including how many of those people are probably also inflamed and how many of those people are probably also at least overweight, if not obese. There's corrections that actually need to be made in the databases, or not just corrections, okay? Like I've said this on podcasts before too, but it's an important lesson. There is no such thing as bad data. There is no such thing as bad data. Data is data. That's all that it is. The only thing that can be bad about data is your interpretation of it. That's the only thing that makes data good or bad. Data is just data. Data doesn't have an opinion. Data is nothing. Even if it was collected poorly, you should interpret it differently then. You call it bad data. Well, then interpret it for what it is. Data is never bad. It's not. The only thing that can actually make data bad is your interpretation of it. That's the only thing. Okay? So looking at those large databases and understanding, or at least having a skeptical eye when you are hearing claims or programming for your own people, I think is critical. Like, it's a very critical lesson to walk away from this episode with. It's also it gets impacted by our biology. I mean, Black Americans, they show lower total vitamin D, but they have equal active vitamin D and stronger bones than other people. Now, vitamin D, of course, playing a big role in calcium and bone density, and it's a huge. There's a ton of literature on that. But Black Americans, like, there's a difference between 25 hydroxy vitamin D, which is the vitamin D everybody gets, but then 125 vitamin D, which is the active form of vitamin D. If you're looking at Black Americans, they routinely score less in two things. They score less in vitamin D, and they score less in vitamin D binding proteins. So then that, and those two things are going to go together, right? But those two things come back low, but they're 125, their active vitamin D comes back just fine. And that is strengthened by how strong their bones come back within the literature too. So bioavailable, actually free vitamin D is a completely different thing. And your biology, your ethnicity, these things matter. As we continue to collect more research, unsurprisingly, there's differences between men and women. There's differences between ethnicities. These things, as we get sharper and sharper with the interpretation, these things just come out. They come out. And again, unsurprisingly, we can't paint everybody with the same brush. So you can have the same blood and you can get a completely different answer. If you're looking at total vitamin D versus free vitamin D, total vitamin D, by the way, it's not bad at all. It's also a lot cheaper than getting free vitamin D. It's a great marker. You just need to know how to interpret it properly, because it's looking at vitamin D, the free plus the bound. So the free plus what's happening with albumin, what's happening with vitamin D protein. You're kind of getting that one giant marker. It's kind of like looking at total testosterone versus free testosterone. That's what it's like. Total testosterone, you're getting the hormone plus all the fun stuff that comes along with it, like sex hormone, binding globulin, albumin, the other things. Whereas free testosterone, you're just looking at the free direct version of that marker. And that's kind of like what you're looking at with vitamin D too. So in the same way we interpret total for testosterone different from free testosterone, you got to interpret total vitamin D different than free vitamin D. But total testosterone is actually a phenomenal marker, just like total vitamin D. They're both great markers. I use both of them very effectively with good interpretation. You just got to know what you're looking at and interpreting both. So how do you kind of read this thing? If you had like some sort of a flow chart to look at vitamin D, and just like, you guys don't need to know all the biochemistry behind the carrier proteins, behind the C3 epimers. You don't need to know the genetics behind it all. Like, I'll actually go back because there's something I didn't mention. This Black American study, actually, genetics explained 79% of the binding protein difference. 79%. That was genetically related. That was not anything else, okay? 79% of the end result in this trial came back to genetics. So again, you can't paint everybody with the same brush, and you need to look and think more. Don't just look at it like it's the bathroom scale. You need to look at it and think, why are things happening the way that they're happening? So when we are looking at this thing, how do we think, right? How should I think when I look at vitamin D? Well, first I should rule out illness, and it's typically if C-reactive protein is high, you've got some sort of acute illness or acute inflammation. You need to look at that first. Then you can look at the method, because the method at which it's drawn, you can look at 125 active, you can look at total vitamin D, or the actual processing. That will change things. Adjusting it for context. If somebody, is it winter? Does somebody have higher body fat percentage? That context matters. You want to mind the timing, like how close did they have their last vitamin D supplement? And also knowing the half-life of that supplement too. Are you standardizing it at that draw every single time so it's actually consistent? Mind the timing of that draw. Read the trend. Never just look at one marker. You do want to collect trends on people over time, so you can look at the deviations of how far away they're getting from their norm, if things are moving in the right direction or not. and then confirm. You can confirm the whole thing at the very end. So if you want to learn how to think about this stuff, if it's just this slide that you take and it's just one thing you remember, you're already going to start interpreting vitamin D better than 99% of the people out there. Think about this, kind of just go through this mental checklist when you look at a vitamin D number, and then think about the 4 reasons I gave you for why it might be low and the 4 reasons I gave you why it might be high. Some of the most obvious ones that are slapping us in the face, like, and someone's genetics and their background. You are already interpreting vitamin D better than 99% of the people on the planet. 99.99% of the people on the planet. No one talks about this stuff. And it's crazy because everyone talks about vitamin D, but no one talks about how to interpret it properly. Everyone talking about vitamin D only freaking matters if you interpret it properly. The gap is the norm. A lot of this stuff is real. Okay. So as much as I want to sing the praise of accurate interpretation, which I will for the rest of my life, okay, I want to push the boundaries of how accurate we get with this stuff until I'm gone. I'm going to be doing this forever, every single day. And this is still something that a lot of people are low in, regardless of interpretation. Okay. You look at this study here, this is 546 samples across 355 athletes in many different areas. And during the winter, insufficiency reached 74%. And I'm pointing this out because these are athletes. These people aren't inflamed. These people don't have insulin resistance. These people don't have overly high estrogen. These people aren't obese. Like, these are athletes across many different areas. And you're still seeing that during the winter, 74% of them are actually insufficient in this time. And 28% of them were outright deficient. 28 deficient. So even if you're correcting for a lot of these contextual things, man, being actually deficient, this is huge. Okay, so the only way you're ever going to know this stuff is to test. I recommend getting blood work. Really, I mean, absolute minimum once per year. But that's, I think, too low if you really want to optimize your health. I think 4 times per year is a beautiful spot to be in, but I would say at least twice per year. A lot of people fall neatly in the twice per year world, where 1 is not enough. 4 is kind of too much for some people, honestly, but twice per year is like a real sweet spot for a lot of people to take advantage of their cognitive and physical performance, but also just take advantage of their preventative health while they're at it too. So get this test done, and also get one test done in the summer and get one done in the winter. You should know where you're at during these times and adjust accordingly based on where you're at. And then you can also test from year to year, right? Like get a test every time in the summer and get a test every time in the winter. And then you don't compare your summer reading to your winter reading in the long term. You can compare winter to winter, and you can be like, okay, so typically by January, this is when I start to get low. So now next time I am going to start supplementing with vitamin D in November so that I don't actually end up in the low spot by January. You can start acting preventatively rather than reactively to your blood test. Then you can start getting really great blood tests. You can almost gamify yourself because you're comparing year to year. You know when you're going to be low. So you know when to start a specific protocol so that you're always feeling good rather than sometimes just, you ever have a month where you're just like, man, I've been off this month. I don't know what's going on. I kind of got brain fog right now. And I've just been tired after training. I'm not recovering like I was a month ago. And I feel like I'm doing those same things. You probably are. But you're not comparing season to season. Like there's a lot of stuff. And if you did, I bet you probably feel that way every season. And you keep forgetting that you always feel that way every season. And every year you're like, man, what's going on? But if you backtracked it, you would be able to actually see that stuff. I've seen it with clients a lot. And I've actually seen it with whole teams where I'll compare off-season to off-season or in-season to in-season, and then start acting preventatively with team-wide structures so that during the off-season, this is typically when we run into this. During the in-season, this is when we typically run into this. So let's offset that by operating with this protocol at this time. You guys get the idea, okay? There's so much fun learning and I guess learning is the right word, but you'll start to find things out about you that you won't see in textbooks, that you won't see online, that you won't see me talk about. Right? There's a cool self journey where you are going to find the things that are uniquely you, and you will do that when you start comparing test to test, season to season, and when you find the things that are uniquely you, that's when you can really individualize this process and make it awesome. But I digress. Like I said previously, that 35 degree latitude marker that I've outlined for you here, which as a Canadian, I'm very familiar with. You guys, the vitamin D does matter. Okay. And during the winter, you can see this graph that I've created for you here. Winter is when things really climb. And in the summer, they still don't totally correct unless you've got a great diet and you actually get a lot of sun. But again, hand in the air. Who gets a lot of sun and has a great diet? Do you know anybody who gets a lot of sun and has a phenomenal diet? Actually, that's probably a bad one. I'm sure you do, but I'm sure you know people who don't. I'm sure you know people who don't get any sunlight at all and actually don't have that good of a diet and continue to throw off the national databases for this stuff. But like that's why things don't get corrected in summertime, and you kind of see that correction. I mean, there's some correction there, but they're still not. They're still not in a good spot. So supplementation is important. It really is. But when it comes to supplementation, more isn't better. Check this out, you guys. In this study, they did one dose of 500,000 IU of vitamin D. 500,000. Okay, that's not a verbal typo. Isn't that crazy? But sometimes the things you see in the research are absolutely bananas. But they did 500,000 IU of vitamin D, and it actually increased their risk of fractures in their bone rather than helped it. So you could see the falls and the fractures that happened there on the left side of the screen. It made it worse because that giant intake of vitamin D actually increased the body's own production of the enzymes that catabolize vitamin D and get it out of the body. So 24-hydroxylase and FGF23 both increase, and they start clearing vitamin D out of the body, and they start offsetting the actual balance between vitamin D and calcium. Those enzymes, they're breaking vitamin D. And then despite this massive dose, these people are ending up functionally deficient because they created such a massive spike in their body. Their body had no idea what to do with except clear it out, because your body really treated this like it was a poison. It's like, what is this? This is way too much of it. I need the enzymes on overdrive right now to clear this thing out because it's absolutely insane. And it got it out of the body like it got a poison out of the body. But when it got it out of the body, it didn't just take out the bad guys, it took the good guys with it too. And the absolute opposite happens. Falls and fractures went up in this population. Falls and fractures actually went up. And the reason why they went up is the real lesson here. More is not better. There is an enzyme in your body that will always say no to what you want to do. More is not better. You're not smarter than biology. Enzymes say no. And then you pay the price for it. Okay, so although I am saying supplementing with vitamin D is wildly important, I think it is. I do it for my people when they actually need it, but more is not better. This has to die. Okay, that type of thinking has to die. And when you start looking at all this stuff, guys, this is 25,871 randomized adults across 5 years, 2,000 IU of vitamin D3 per day. They're in a great spot. They're fine. When you start supplementing people that are already fine, guess what happens? Almost nothing. Okay? Almost nothing. When you supplement with people who already have adequate status, pretty much nothing happens. I wish exciting stuff happened, like with zinc, for example. If someone's deficient in zinc and then you replete their zinc status, their testosterone goes up. Dude, I wish we could just keep taking more zinc. Forget milligrams. I'd be taking grams of zinc. We're taking grams of zinc. Let's just drive that testosterone up, baby. Let's go. It's gym. It's bench day. We're gonna go get it. But that doesn't happen, because once you're already replete in zinc, testosterone says thanks, but we're done here, and more is not better. Same thing with vitamin D. You give, even across this large of a population, which again, you guys, 2,000 IU of vitamin D3, that's not like this small dose. That's a great dose. It's a great dose. I'm working with the best athletes in the world and some of the best CEOs on the planet. And I'm not doing these wild things. They just don't, they don't bear fruit. They just don't. When you look at this large population, no change in cancer incidence, no change in fractures, no change in cardiovascular events. If you correct a real deficiency, real things happen. That's amazing. But if someone's already great, then you don't need to get crazy with it. You just don't. And I think a lot of people could save money on supplements. Vitamin D is not that expensive, so like it's not the best example. But like, you don't need it if you don't need it. You'll never know if you need it unless you interpret your test properly, but you don't need it if you don't need it. And you can save money on supplements, and that money could go somewhere else. Like you could actually spend more money on stress management, spend more money on food quality, spend more money on sleep quality. Maybe there's some cool sleep gadgets you could get, whatever it's going to be. You just be allocating your budget to go towards more impactful places. And everything, honestly, is more impactful than a supplement that is no longer serving you, because then it's literally doing nothing. So like getting anything is better at that point. But getting out of a deficiency, this is a phenomenal thing. This is when it becomes a true lever. Okay, when you're correcting a true deficiency, bone and muscle, they're going to improve in both bone density and muscle function. You're going to improve inflammation status. You're going to improve a lot of different areas of actual medical and disease risk that comes with vitamin D. Look that up. Vitamin D is connected to a lot of things that you don't want to be anywhere near. And this is where a lot of the truest wins come from, is when you're correcting an actual deficiency and then getting into the sufficient world. You're going to get more wins when you get into the performance world. And I'll show you here. There is more wins in the performance world as you keep going, right? If you're deficient in 10 to 20 and you get to adequate, then you're going to get a ton of real benefits. But once you start continuing, strength is actually going to start to get a little bit better once you get over 40. Once you get over 30. But the real payoff in the performance world is getting vitamin D over 40 for the purpose of injury risk minimization. It's coming in the form of injury risk minimization and bone resilience. You can get your marker to 40, then you're going to be in a great spot. Full disclosure, and I'll always be open with you guys. I used to have a higher vitamin D performance threshold. I used to want vitamin D to be between 55 and 80, and I've since changed my views. As I've really, really, really dove into this topic, and I've stayed open-minded, and I've listened to experts, and I've just been dedicating my life to this thing, I've actually lowered the threshold to 40. Lowered the threshold, and 40 is getting you absolutely everything you need. Honestly, getting from deficient to just 30 is getting you 90% of the way there. And then you are going to continue to climb and collect a few more benefits on your way to 40. And then after 40, you're in a phenomenal spot. You could see, and I always give you guys these studies, and I link everything that I'm talking about here, but this is a meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled trials, 354 athletes. They show a really good signal here, and this is with respect to strength. This is with respect to less illnesses, and you're just getting more training stability, right? If you're not sick as often, you can train more. If you are stronger, you can train better. If you're not injured, you can train more consistently. Like, the real standout with vitamin D is kind of training availability, because you're not sick as often and you're not injured as often. And then when you're there, you're just performing better, A, because you have optimal vitamin D, but B, because you're actually just training more. And that's driving the real benefit over the long run. So you can kind of see, I created this like crude graph for you here on the bottom right. And this is not, this accurate scientific finding, but it's what you'll see when you look through 100 studies like I've looked through. The lower you are in vitamin D, the greater the benefit's going to be. And then that benefit kind of slowly tapers off until you get to around 30, and then it continues. You see, I don't actually block it off yet. Continues until you get to 40, and then that's when you start to flatten out. So that's what your target should be. Once you've listened to this podcast here today, interpret your vitamin D properly, and then after you've interpreted it properly, you can get it to 40. And then if it's quality interpretation plus 40, you are in the vitamin D gold zone. All right. But that vitamin D gold zone, it's only ever going to be realized if you're also in the magnesium gold zone. Another thing almost nobody talks about, and another thing almost nobody considers when looking at large databases. Okay. If you say, and you guys are probably familiar with this, when you look at, how many Europeans are low in magnesium? How many Canadians are low in magnesium? How many Americans are low in magnesium? How many worldwide is low in magnesium? It's a huge percentage of the population. Huge. Everywhere you look, and also in athletes. And you literally can't use vitamin D unless you have magnesium. No, you can't. And actually, there's scientific literature, and I've linked it here for you, that magnesium supplementation, independent of vitamin D supplementation, raises vitamin D status. Why? Because magnesium is required. Magnesium is required to make this thing work. You don't get that stored vitamin D into workable vitamin D unless you have magnesium there. Period. End of discussion. That's it. So that should be in your mind for partnering with the protocol. If you look and someone's really low in vitamin D, and you're not measuring their magnesium, you should be measuring their magnesium. But if you're not like co-programming vitamin D with magnesium, I think you're just missing the boat. Yeah, those two things need to be programmed together. In the same way, a lot of people look at vitamin D and K2. They program D3 and K2 together, and I think that's a great idea. I think that's a really good idea. I do. But those people don't mention magnesium in the same breath. Okay? And then again, you can interpret large databases poorly. It's like 70% of this database is low in magnesium and 70% of this database is low in vitamin D. Okay, it's time to start drawing correlations to those, because we have mechanisms for that. It's not just like, I wonder what's going on. Like, we actually have physiologic mechanisms to start having these conversations. And they should just be sharpening our protocol design. They really should be. What's the right number? I kind of already told you, because I like to get excited and I like to get ahead of myself on these things. But between 40 and 80, that's the spot you want to be at. So in one of the earliest slides, I said, this is what the medical industry does. This is what the Endocrine Society does. Well, this is what Dan Garner does. All right. This is the Dan Garner slide. So you're looking at that same person in the earlier slide that got 32, came back normal in the medical world, came back sufficient from the Endocrine Society, but came back good but low in the Dan Garner world. This is it. Okay. I would want that person. If that person was working with me, I'd be interpreting that properly and getting them between 40 and 80. Okay, there is no reason to go over 80. And if you want to optimize vitamin D, you should be at least 40. You stay in that world and you're going to be in a really, really great spot. And you'll have optimally leveraged every lever that vitamin D has to offer. Do it right. Okay, do it right. You got 4 moves. Test this thing. I recommend at least twice per year. But if you're a real gangster, do this thing 4 times per year. That's a great spot to be in. You want to dose daily. 4,000 IU per day does stay inside the safe range, but I'll vary between 2 and 4,000 based on what the lab result says. That's typically me personally. That's really how I program. I'll stay between 2 and 4,000. I have pushed it higher before, and I used to push it a lot higher in my younger days. But as I get older in this industry and as I get more experience and as I read more literature, I just find it unnecessary. I just simply find it unnecessary. I get very quick results and I retest in 3 months and that person's good to go. You just don't need anything crazy if you're having it with fat in a meal, if you're also having magnesium with that, if that person's inflammation's controlled, if that person's leaner, right? You're checking those boxes. You're gonna find that people driving a freaking sledgehammer of vitamin D3, the reason why they need a D3 sledgehammer in their protocols is because their protocol sucks. All right, sorry, not sorry. If you need 50,000 IU of vitamin D to get a marker to move, your protocol probably sucks. It just does, because that doesn't make physiologic sense. All right. So step 1, test clean. Make that blood draw environment the same every single time from test to test. Step 2, dose sanely and in an evidence-based way. Step 3, get magnesium and K2 in there. They're your boys. They're going to help you out, and we'll do future podcasts on that stuff. And if you missed the magnesium podcast, go back and watch it. It's very important. And then retest across the season. So not just test to test, but retest season to season. You follow those 4 steps there, and you're gonna have all your bases covered. You just got it done. So what's your field guide here? This is more because I give you guys the slides to everything. This is not really a slide for talking. It's more of a slide for this is your field guide. You know, keep this with you. Keep it in your pocket at all times. You never know when you're going to have to interpret someone's vitamin D. Keep it in your pocket at all times. All right, keep 2. Keep 1 in each pocket. But this will just let you know what the numbers that matter. I make the dorkiest jokes here, and I'm talking to myself. This is fantastic. The numbers that matter, the things that you need to trust, what actually offsets the test most commonly, and then how to fix it the right way. That's your field guide. I'm not just an educator, I'm a coach. So I like to give you guys real recommendations and real field guides to go forward with in order to knock this thing out and get real results, because that's what we need to do. And that's a wrap, team. I hope you were able to learn something new about vitamin D here. There's a lot to discuss, and each of those mechanisms, we could dive into those. Each of those mechanisms are like 20-minute talks with lots of slides, but I want to provide as much value for you in as little time as possible, so that you want to come back So you want to come back and hang out with me and keep watching more Vitality Unlocked podcasts. All right. Thank you for being here. Don't just read the number. Know whether or not to believe it. I'm out.